Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Women Who Rock Investigates, where branding just got even better for women. Our media source provides case studies in the areas of health, policy and government, human resources, and more. Our experts are handpicked with credible information to validate the latest in these studies. Join us each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time after Women Who Rock with Success. Now, let's go to the show.
Hey, good morning, and welcome to Women Who Rock with Success Investigates. And this is your host, Diane, and we're going to get right into the show because it's a very intense time. We're still dealing with the COVID-19, and so we're also dealing with the George Floyd issue that is going on that is exciting, that's inciting some issues around the nation. So, and a lot of commentaries have made correspondents have
right, you rush this damn thing, man.
Has made a lot of comments in regards to that. So today on the broadcast we have not for sure what that is. So today on the broadcast, sorry about that, we have a good panel. So first we'd like to introduce our first attending panel that is the founder of the Justice Connection, which is a database platform focused on connecting the top legal talents of color to local communities, and she is none other than Ms. Keisha Brown. Our second panel guest is highly experienced Connecticut criminal defense attorney, Alan Freeman, who is a six-time guest back on the show of the Freeman Law Firm, LLC. Our third panelist today is professor at Stevens Institute of Technology, and she has worked on the Citizen's Guide to the Supreme Court, and she is none other than Lindsay Cormack. And our last panel guest is Assistant Programs Director of the Emergency Medicine Residency Program at the University of Illinois at Chicago, with specific interest in both academic and social emergency medicine, and currently working on the front lines fighting COVID-19, and that is none other than Dr. Chris Colbert. So welcome to the show, guys. Good morning.
Good morning, Diane.
Good morning.
Okay, perfect. Do we have Keisha and Lindsay on the line? Hold on for 1 second, because there's a lot that's on the line today, and I guess this topic, because I want to make sure everybody's muted. So we're going to get started with Chris. Dr. Colbert. So we're going to first start with the COVID-19, and his expertise is going to kind of take us into what our actually discussion is about. And, of course, we have seen protests that are going on from state to state in regards to the George Floyd issue. I would say pandemic is just about turning into one. So we're going to talk to him and let him share his expertise, a little bit about him, and as to the importance of the social distancing at this time in regards to the protesting that we're seeing around the globe. So go ahead, Dr. Chris.
Well, thank you very much, Diane. You made a very valid point, is that we have to be mindful that COVID-19 still exists, and that in full support of any demonstration, you have to keep in mind health concerns as well. Specifically, are you able to hear? There we go. Specifically, our suggestion, our recommendations, in fact, are for people to always wear masks, to take hand sanitizer with you during any demonstration. Ideally, the conversation is 3 feet between another human being. That's somewhat unrealistic during an actual protest. But ideally, simple things like it, and coupled with that, the peaceful protest, limited spitting will decrease any virulence or transmission of the actual any sort of virus as well. And our other recommendation is that if you are sick in any capacity, if there's sick in any capacity, please refrain from protesting and find alternative means of communicating your thoughts.
Okay. And so that's great. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do at the University of Illinois.
Oh, no, perfect. I am the Assistant Program Director of Emergency Medicine here at the University of Illinois. I provide, in fact, what I do is ideally design the academic and enhance our academic curriculum. Very passionate in reference to the social aspect of emergency medicine as well. As you well know, the emergency medicine has all takers. And in fact, we are kind of the boots to ground and have early signs of many things that are to come to pass or to develop, in fact. There's a lot to be said in reference to what we see and what eventually spills out in the media, what happens within policy as well. There's a ripple effect of what happens in the world and then what comes into the emergency room. I enjoy it. I can affect change both in policy within emergency medicine and a positive effect on the community at large, and very passionate in reference to participating or providing insight so that the community at large can make more informed decisions on healthcare.
Great. So do we have Lindsay on the line at this time?
Yes, I'm on the line. Can you hear me?
Okay. Hi, Lindsay. So we're going to let you go second, since this is your first time as well on the investigative show. So tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I'm an assistant professor of politics at the Stevens Institute of Technology, which is a premier engineering school in Hoboken, New Jersey. And my research generally focuses on members of Congress and what they're willing to say to constituents over official e-newsletter. However, within the school, I teach our judicial process courses, and I lead our Center for Diplomacy.
Great. So first question for you in regards to the George Floyd, or I'll take that back, in regards to the to the judicial system. Okay, so since the time, we're going to go back to the times of Trayvon Martin, and that's been a while, maybe 2012, 2014. So why do we see the same repetitive behavior from the justice system that you think that we could do to improve what we're seeing today?
So from where I'm sitting, one of the biggest things that we could work to kind of change is the idea of immunity that is afforded to police officers, known as qualified immunity. So if it is the case that you and I got into a fight and maybe you tripped me, I'd be able to say you violated my rights and I could sue you. However, if you were a police officer and you tripped me and I wanted to sue you, I could still do that, but you might have a defense that says there's a qualified immunity such that, in the line of the job that you're doing, it's uncertain the type of people you're dealing with or the situations that you're in, and therefore you ought not be held liable for those sorts of actions. The extension of this law is to most executive actors, but in practice, this tends to protect police from things that you and I wouldn't be protected. We would be held liable for these things. So that's something that people in Congress are talking about working. And while the Supreme Court this term hasn't granted cert to any cases that would deal with this, it is hopeful from both the right and the left of people on the Supreme Court that they will grant cert to these cases in the next term next year.
Because it continues to appear that the same behavior continues, the pattern continues to to present the same thing over and over and over. And I think Van Jones, I think he's he's one of the CNN correspondents of CNN, and so he just made it publicly plain. It's something that we have to do. The laws are not changing. We're still going through the same thing over and over and over. It's like a merry-go-round. And so I guess some individuals feel, some ethnic backgrounds feel, that is the best way for their voices to be heard, and that's to be able to protest. So great response. So do we have Keisha on the line? Okay. So, do we have Alan on the line?
Hello. Good morning, Diane.
Hey, Alan. So, and thank you for being a guest again. Tell the other panelists a little bit about yourself and about what you do at your law practice.
Oh, good to meet with you again, Diane, and the new panelists. I just have to say, in my heart, it's a powerful day remembering George Floyd today, the day he's going to be laid to rest. It's a powerful day in America. Hopefully his loss will not be in vain. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I've been fighting for the rights of those who have been criminally oppressed by the system for 28 years. And justice is something that I fight for daily. I just wanted to point out a little something I've been thinking about over the last several days as I've been watching the protests. There are a lot of instances where minorities are shot or killed at the hands of police, and they are tragic incidents. They are somewhat isolated, statistically as a whole. But what a lot of people don't understand is on a daily basis throughout the United States, people of color or any minority group are encountered with unjust outcomes in the criminal justice system and unfamiliar and unfriendly outcomes in policing on a daily basis. And I think that a lot of the protests perhaps is also resonating from the anger and the frustration from dealing with those types of realities.
What do you think it's going?
The reality of the fact that the criminal justice system in the United States is very unfair, that we live in a police state, and unfortunately minorities are disproportionately incarcerated in the United States. And it's interesting, we have a panelist today, doctor, who is talking about the COVID crisis and the protest movement being a danger for spreading the COVID crisis. It's ironic how the COVID crisis showed us that even a health crisis is disproportionately affecting minority groups in our country due to the social and health injustice that exists in the United States. So I guess in summary, my message today is that this man's loss is just a symbol that we have a long way to go in correcting racial injustice in our country.
Okay, absolutely. So, Dr. Colbert, back to you in regards to the COVID. After everything is over with, in regards to the protests, once everything is over with the COVID-19, they're saying now that there is a spike in the COVID, is people having COVID. How are we to determine that? Because, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was someone that is being sued, if I'm not mistaken, like a hospital or something, because they withheld the information. I don't know if it was I think it was in the state of Mississippi that they were sued for not revealing the information as to citizens, as to the nursing homes that were affected by the COVID-19. So do you feel that we're going to see a spike, or have you seen a spike since the protests have occurred in your location that you're in?
That's a great question. And, in fact, that is a question that I receive not only from patients but neighbors and in every capacity. It is a little bit early to draw the line in the sand and say in which direction this is going to go. What I can tell you is that let's just take out COVID just for a second. Just talk physiology. We'll talk pathology. Viruses in general. The closer people are together, the more individuals that have a virus are around other individuals that do not have the virus, statistically, it will spread, and it will increase. And that is our concern. If you walk into 98 hospitals, USA, we are all still wearing masks. We are all still taking the temperature of everyone who walks in. Unfortunately, at this time, no guests are allowed to come into the emergency room and or the hospital to decrease, in fact, the transmission of the virus. I think it's yet to be seen what this will have an effect on the cases that we see. At this point, at my shop, the numbers are pretty much leveling off. I have not seen a specific spike, but we are prepared if, in fact, there is a spike. We have things in place, triage in place, as well as admitting services specific for COVID to decrease any transmission while coming to the emergency room, coming to the hospital, and or being admitted.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that the doctor, I'm not for sure what his name is it Faust? How accurate is...
Faust, yeah.
Okay,
right.
So how accurate is what he is bringing to the table? Because, President Trump had a clash with him as well, and so he had to go back and recant his words in regards to some of the comments and statements that he had made on CNN. So how accurate, and then, some death threats that came towards Dr. Faust as well. So how accurate can we depend on some of the, statistics of what he's bringing to the Americans?
Well, and that's a very good question, and it's my policy to take the insight from individuals who are very understanding of their topic, and it has been my practice to read and to take research and to take for credit individuals who take the time to understand and disseminate information based on their specialty. I do follow and respect the comments from Dr. Falk. I do. I believe that he has the data, he has the data collection, and he has the team to provide insight. He was, in fact, the key to say, hey, we need to wear masks. I'm concerned that this possibly could be a pandemic. He was the individual to communicate that. And again, I'm boots to the ground. I actually see these patients that come into the emergency room. Late March, early April, it was very challenging a very challenging time for any healthcare professional in Chicago, in New York, in Detroit, and just across the United States. I put a lot of credit to the comments that he makes, and my humble suggestion to everyone, in fact, is to be mindful of the medical insight that you're taking. Are the individuals that you are taking insight from, are they knowledgeable of medicine? Is this the usual audience? Is this the usual individual that you would take medical advice from? And then to move forward with that thinking. Okay, fair enough. So, Lindsay, could you go over with the audience if you have seen the latest information and the latest headline news in regards to George Floyd, as to, because we're trying to get to the bottom of as to why, it doesn't matter if it was something huge or small. It still does not constitute, the pressure point tactics that law enforcement use. Now, we're not here to judge and not to put anyone under the bus, but we're trying to get a full understanding as to why law enforcement sometimes will go overboard and use their tactic training in an aggressive way.
Well, I certainly can't speak to what was happening in the officers who were there that day or the people who are there as onlookers. But I think we all recognize it is a stressful in any sort of job. That seems hard. Were you able to hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, and so without knowing, their true motivations or what's happening there, it would surprise me if it was the active practice to have that be a way of restraining people, and that's something for the police department there to kind of put out. But I know that he's been charged, and I think as of today, 3 other officers who were there have been charged as accessories to this. So it seems like there is movement in a way that is positive towards justice. But even then, attorney generals are warning that it's going to be very hard to prosecute these people effectively in a way that I think many of the protesters and many people who are outraged by this would like to see it through.
Great. So do you think that when they actually get the justice for George Floyd in a way that the Americans wanted, we're not talking about a death penalty or 30 years or anything like that, but I think what the Americans are looking for is for justice in regards to, does it fit the crime of whatever Floyd or was accused or alleged accused of doing. And so do you think that will kind of help in future protests where they're a little bit more peaceful and the violence is minimized?
Well, I will tell you, I'm calling from the Upper East Side of New York City, where we have seen our share of both peaceful and then protests that turn into something less peaceful at the end of it. And it's very hard to understand what justice would look like here, because it's certainly the case that if George Floyd didn't resist arrest, as people who are there who are on the ground said, and he was still met with these really heavy-handed tactics, it's hard to see what sort of justice would be other than a conviction of murder for the officer involved. And even then, there's probably a lot of revamping that has to go into the Minneapolis police force that talks about, what excessive force is and why, when you're hearing certain things, you need to be able to talk to your other officers and ask them to stop. Because there's more than just one police officer who's engaged in this arrest. There's other people who are there who have a responsibility to protect the people, no matter the situation. And so I think it's something where the question of if justice is going to be served is really hard to answer, because it's not quite clear what justice would be.
Yeah. I understand you on that, and so that's going to be the next question for Alan in regards to, sometimes we're on we have the scales of justice, and it's just like you put a piece of peppermint on one side of the scale, and you put an onion on the other side of the scale. Well, the one that has the onion on it is going to be lower. So why is it, again, because we have discussed this several times, Alan, on the broadcast, about, the upside down, some of the prisoners that get out, they were released due to COVID-19. Then you had some of the politics, they were just released with no problem and no issues. And so we have, I think the Attorney General, it's not Attorney General, he was the DA. He was making a statement on television where he had to get the facts. But it just as, I think it was Van Jones, I listened to him a lot. He's a correspondent of CNN. He was stating, it was probable cause that was seen right there on the video. You didn't have to wait 3 or 4 days. Why couldn't these people get that information, those answers, within at least the first 12 hours?
Well, Diane, I just want to say, look, I'm a criminal defense attorney, and everybody who watches that video, if you just watch the video, you're outraged, okay? You see a policeman kneeling on a man's neck, and anyone who watches that, it's an execution, right? And you're outraged. If our system of justice ran on watching a video in isolation, then we would just be a lynch mob. We would all drive down to the police station or jail where this man is being held, and we would take him out and execute him, because there'd be no need for a trial, right? But in the United States, I'm a criminal defense attorney. Just as many black men who I've represented are completely innocent, and the police are convinced that they're guilty, and I've defended them, and they've been found to be not guilty once all the evidence comes out. These 4 officers, in this particular situation, it's interesting. The Attorney General of Minnesota pointed out when he brought the charges that this case might be very difficult to prove at trial. And I just like to point out a couple of things about the 4 different officers. Now, listen, I'm not condoning what any of them have done. I'm just speaking to you from a criminal defense lawyer's perspective, and a lot of people are not aware of all the different facts. The officer who had the knee on George's neck, which was totally deplorable, had 19 years experience. The other officers who were assisting and holding him down, some of which who commented and said, listen, should we turn him over? What do you think? Do you think he's having some kind of shock? Some of those officers only had 3 months experience on the job. When the 19-year experienced officer is telling him, no, we're going to leave him here in this position, there could be an argument that the defense lawyer could raise to say, hey, listen, this guy wasn't an accessory to an assault, because that's what basically this is. This is a unintentional murder. It's basically felony murder. What happens in this type of crime that they're charged with, the main perpetrator is charged with a felony murder. It's an aggravated assault, and it's a death that occurred in the commission of an aggravated assault. And the 3 other co-defendants are charged with aiding and abetting the felony assault. So the defense lawyers, the reason why it might be difficult to convict the other 3 co-defendants, they all have different levels of aiding and abetting, right? So in the charging documents, which I've read from the state of Minnesota, they do acknowledge that George, the victim, may he rest in peace, was resisting. He did not want to get into the police car. Now, the body cameras, which none of us have seen, are going to show to the extent that which he was resisting. And there's always the issue of causation. Now, I'm not saying that man who put his knee on that man's neck was not the cause of the accident, but a defense lawyer who's going to defend the case is going to raise the issue. Ironically, we're talking about COVID. Mr. Floyd apparently had COVID virus in his body, heart problems, and was on fentanyl. So, undoubtedly some defense lawyer is going to try to defend the case is going to have a field day on this to say that, the strangulation possibly was not the cause of the death. It was these, the drugs or these other issues. And obviously the lawyers for these other officers who are on the scene, who are just brand new officers, are possibly going to say, hey, listen, you know what? These are new officers. They're trying to tell the other officer, should we turn them over? Should we do this? And the other guy's saying, no, keep them there. How can they disobey the direct order of their supervisor? And the one problem, in the past with a lot of the other very well-known and well-filed police prosecutions where there's been acquittals, like the Rodney King case and others, has been citizens, and I think this case is going to be different because the video in this case is so deplorable that it's going to be very difficult for anybody to draw any other conclusion that this is just a maniacal homicide. But be that as it may, generally juries have been very reluctant to make the conclusion that a police officer woke up in the morning with the intention to kill somebody that day and had a bad intention historically, right? Obviously, and I just want to say this to your viewers, is we're all armed today with a very powerful defensive weapon. It's great that people are out there protesting. Another great thing that people can do in their daily life is carry their defensive weapon, their smartphone, right, and use it. not only to protect themselves, but to protect other people. When you see police out there, if you think they're doing something wrong, you have a right to use your smartphone. And thank God for the person who used their smartphone that day to record this, because if they didn't, we wouldn't have this evidence, and George Floyd would not be receiving the justice that he deserves. So use your smartphone and protect yourself and others. Most police officers are good, hardworking people who are not out to harm people and doing the best job they can. But there are some bad actors, who occasionally do horrible things. And, starting with the Rodney King case where apparently, somebody had a camcorder, happened to catch the brutality against Rodney King. And until today, we've had these situations where, the video footage has resulted in prosecutions that otherwise would have been swept under the rug.
I absolutely agree. And so, as I stated before, we're not here to be biased. It's just trying to get some information and also to be able to share information with the audience because I think when we communicate less, that is which causes a lot of the issues. So this question will go to Lindsay. And so my question for you, Lindsay, okay, so on this, in regards to this case or any other case, we're just not even going to talk about the Floyd case. We're just going to talk about any case. Okay, so how does the law differentiate between the difference between which medical examiner, because there are two conflicting stories with the medical examiner's information that was given. The one that was given, I guess, by the state said that he had toxins or something like that in his body. And so when George Floyd's family went and they got their own medical examiner, he went in and he gave a different testimony that it was nothing that was in his body. And so this is also which enraged people, too. I think, too, as well, when we're dealing with things in a judicial form, I think silence can also be a help as well, because I think that when they felt, I'm just taking this from CNN, and it was stated that some individuals will be in caboose with like I said, we don't have to call no names. We're not here to be biased. Some law enforcement will be in caboose with the medical examiner, and that's for the medical examiner to get them, off the hook and a good testimony. So in the judicial sense of it, how can two medical examiners' reports be different, and which one can be admissible in the court of law?
So this might be a question that Alan is better to chime in on, but I did read the reports that you're talking about where it sounds like the state's examiners were saying that there was more evidence of drugs, I think fentanyl, marijuana, and something else in the system, as well as preceding heart, cardiovascular, and lung disease that maybe precipitated his death. And what the family has hired, the examiner there indicated that it was from sustained pressure on his neck and then the closing of his air pipe. As to what's admissible, it is not, I do not know of anything that would say that, you only have to take the medical examiner that the state does. You'd have to examine both of them. But your intuition there is correct that it is likely that people who work for the state, whether that be police or whether that be coroners, they generally have a better working relationship than someone who would be hired from outside to do this. So the insinuation or thought that maybe they'd be in cahoots with each other, I think is understandable. But from the standpoint of when this goes to trial, what's permissible, it's not clear that one will be taken over the other. But I think Alan would probably be better to answer this.
Perfect. Okay, and so put a pin in that, Alan, and we're going to go to Dr. Colbert at this time. And so this is in regards to Dr. Colbert. All of the looting and all of the rioting that has been going on, what would you suggest for businesses, small businesses, local businesses, businesses like Macy's and the other businesses that have went through all of this looting in their stores? Do you think that they would have to go back in and do another wipe down, clean down,
sanitization in their business in order for them to be able to recoup fully from the COVID-19 so that others won't be able to catch it if they come into their facility?
I'm confident there is a cleaning process in any capacity, and that will surely provide adequate sterilization of the contents. I don't believe there's anything different that needs to be done. Usually these circumstances, I'm pretty confident that most businesses that hire any institution to come in and clean their work, that it will be done appropriately.
Okay. So, still with you, Dr. Colbert, at the institution that you work at, when you see patients that come in, so go over with us, have you seen a big rise in a lot of COVID patients that's coming in regards to whether it's the protest or whether it's in regards to people are just not using social distancing as they should?
Great question. I've seen more patients come in from any protesting, just secondary to bumps and bruises just from protesting, more than any concerns of COVID. By definition, I would say the vast majority of patients that come in from protesting to the ED are just secondary to bumps and bruises from protesting. We have not, at this point, seen a true documented spike in COVID presentation secondary to demonstrating or protesting at this time.
Okay, great. Well, that's great. Great news. Okay, so Alan, back to you in regards to the question that I had for Lindsay, and that's with the medical examiner's report for both sides, for the state as well as for George Floyd's family. How can the public be able to differentiate as to what can be permissible in the court of law? Which one of them will be testifiable and admissible for the courts to hear?
Well, remember, who in a criminal... All right, so let me just say this. We have several different cases that are proceeding at this time, okay? Right now, we have a criminal prosecution against 4 police officers in the state court. It's possible these police officers may be prosecuted in federal court for civil rights violations. I think that would be a much stronger case than these criminal charges that are pending against them. It's clearly obvious to me that the civil rights of Mr. Floyd were violated. Also, a wrongful death action was brought against the city, Minneapolis Police Department, by Attorney Ben Crump. I think that the private autopsy results perhaps would be much more admissible or meaningful in that private civil action, where undoubtedly the family will be seeking recovery for millions of dollars for wrongful death, than in the criminal prosecution. Because don't forget, in a criminal prosecution of the 4 police officers, the prosecuting authority is the state of Minnesota. The defendants are the 4 police officers. So any independent autopsy that will come in would actually be commissioned, presumably by the defendant's defense attorney, if they wished to try to prove exoneration, right? So the family had an opportunity to do an autopsy of their own to try to assist them with their civil case. In a criminal case, generally, the victim is not a participant in the prosecution presenting evidence. So to answer your question, I don't think that, and after reading the autopsy report of the medical examiner of the state, it's clear, after the revised report that came out. It's funny, after the family's report came out, the state revised its report, and it's clear that the suffocation of the body and the application of pressure upon this man's body by 3 police officers was the proximate cause of his death, despite his pre-existing heart conditions and the intoxicants in his blood. And but for the application of a knee to his neck for an extended period of time, almost 9 minutes, which is totally egregious. I think everyone would agree that was shocking and deplorable and outrageous. Obviously, that's practically torn our nation apart. In days of suffering and pain, many people are outraged and in tears and crying. It's a horrible, deplorable act to see a man crying for his mother and asking for breath. Nobody could condone this behavior. It's shocking. But a defense attorney, everybody's entitled to their defense, and it reminds me of the classic case of O.J. Simpson, if everyone could recall that case, where everybody knew that O.J. Simpson killed his estranged wife, right? Okay. Everyone knew that, right? But Johnny Cochran famously, was able to show that the bias of the police against O.J. Simpson existed and that the glove didn't fit. And he famously came up with the line, if the glove doesn't fit, you have to acquit. And the jury bought it. So very often guilt in a criminal case does not equate to a conviction. We have the concept of you have to prove a criminal case beyond a reasonable doubt. And the Attorney General of Minnesota, again, I point out, acknowledge the high bar in raising the charges from third-degree murder to second-degree murder, which they did yesterday. It's a harder case to prove, and it's going to remain to be seen what happens in the court of law.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
hopefully
I agree.
Justice will be served. Hopefully
I
justice
agree.
will be served.
Yeah, I agree. So, Chris, Dr. Colbert, how long do you think that we will see of the COVID-19 and with the social distancing? Because even though churches have been allowed to go back to full capacity, but some have not. And so how long do you think that we need to practice social distancing at this time?
You know what, Diana, I believe that the coronavirus, COVID-19, will be with us for a while. This is a virus. This is a virus similar to other viruses, we still have the swine flu, we still have H1N1, we still have influenza. As time persists, I believe that the medical community will have a better hold on medical management for coronavirus, and I'm definitely passionate that we need to practice social distancing, and something simple as hand washing and wearing your mask. It's just a huge advantage to individuals and to the community as well.
Okay. That's a long time, and I guess we have to adjust, and I'm still practicing my social distancing and what have you, and so great information. So, Lindsay, talk to us about your book, Congress and U.S. Veterans from the GI Bill. Tell us a little bit about that and how we can learn a little bit more in depth about the purpose of you being the author of this book and why you wrote it.
Sure. Changing topics a little bit. What I consider myself as a political scientist is one who really appreciates categorizing and making history available for others. So in 2009, I started a project where I collect every official e-newsletter that every senator and representative sends to their constituents, and it's all available at dcinbox.com. And what I noticed in that database, it's over 100,000 strong now, is that a lot of people like to pay lip service to veterans, saying like we really want to pay honor to men and women in uniform, or, serving veterans is the best thing that I do as a legislator. And so the question of this book is who's paying lip service and who's doing legwork. And what I found was that on average, 70% of the communications that talk about veterans come from Republicans. But when you look at who's drafting the legislation and who is voting to pass legislation that serves veterans, it's generally Democrats. And there's a few reasons for this. Veterans programs are government funded. They almost always involve a healthcare component, so they look kind of like socialized. And they recognize that individuals can have some sort of dependency on the state, which is generally easier to square with Democrat ideology than it is with Republican ideology. So the book was kind of a really neat exercise for me in answering a question that is both political but also government-based. So it's, asking this political question of who's willing to talk about veterans, but who's willing to actually do work on behalf of veterans, and seeing that there's differences there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Great. And so this question is for you, Alan, in regards to the length of time that you feel that we're going to continue to see the same progress when it comes, and I don't think it's just an African American issue. Sometimes, right now, it's the biggest phase that we're trying to get over at this point. We see more African Americans or minorities, if you will, that's in the media when it comes to injustice or what have you. And I know sometimes we have to, we don't see the whole thing. We don't see the beginning of the video. We just see the part where the law enforcement is doing something wrong. So, do you see any time soon that legislators will be looking to revamp these laws so that we can be able to heal? People can be able to get past some things. And then, too, I think it's training as well, because sometimes individuals don't even know what the sentencing guidelines are. They just sign their names or what have you. But it's turning into a crisis as to why many African Americans are put in a position where they cannot get away from.
Well, Diane, a couple things. First of all, in my lifetime, there has been a lot of change. When I was a young boy, Dr. Martin Luther King, who was a great man, who died too young, really made a lot of change in our country. In those days, our country was a really ugly place, and there has been a lot of change towards progress. And I think that we need to keep the foot on the gas pedal of change and keep moving towards more change for civil rights and more change for rights for everybody, whether it be people of color, people of different religious faiths, people of different gender identities, rights for everybody, because that's what makes America great. And I think this movement of all the people who are peacefully protesting is a beautiful thing, because this is what America is all about. I can only see good things coming out of all this dialogue, and hopefully the people in the past, what's happened a lot of times with these type of outrage, especially if you go back to Rodney King, Ferguson, etc. People have a short attention span, and so does the media. It's interesting just to point out, we have the panelist, the doctor, who sounds like a great doctor. He's talking about COVID-19. It's funny how just about 10 days ago, the governor of California was talking about how you got to stay off the beach on CNN, and the beach is dangerous. And now we have protesters filling the streets of Los Angeles every day, and nobody on CNN or any of these channels are talking about COVID-19, because it's kind of like we have a very short attention span in this country. So what I'm saying is these social justice causes are a marathon. They're not a sprint. So to get the kind of change that we need is we need to keep our foot on the gas. And remember, the elections are coming up in November, and the vote is the most powerful voice of all. So I think that the young people are empowered, and they're speaking out, and their voices are being heard, and the peaceful protesters, the ones who are not rioting and causing chaos, then those are very few minority. of the group are doing a great benefit to our society by raising these issues, and if they keep doing what they're doing, their voices will be heard, and we will have reforms. And I will just say this: generally speaking, I looked at the statistics on this before the panel. In a year, we have millions of interactions with police, with civilians. Very few of them result in a fatality or a bad outcome where somebody's injured. Even one fatality of an unarmed person is one too many. I think we'd all agree upon that. But the reality is these type of situations have become less and less statistically. The Washington Post did a very seminal study on this, and the attention of the Gardner case and all these other cases have had effects on police practicing, and generally the phenomenon is getting better. As I pointed out earlier in my comments today, I think the number one problem that we have in our society, and perhaps maybe some of the anger that the protesters and all the people who are outraged in this movement are feeling, is that when a person of color is encountering the police, what they're experiencing on a daily basis is perhaps not getting executed on the street as George Floyd was, but perhaps what they're experiencing a disproportionately unfair outcome in the criminal justice system opposed to somebody else. Just because of the color of their skin, they're being treated unfairly, rudely, and they're getting charged with crimes that maybe perhaps they otherwise would not be charged with. And that's not right in 2020. And I see that on a daily basis in my practice, and that needs to change.
Absolutely. So with just a few minutes left, we're going to go back to Dr. COVID. Share with the audience, what do you want to leave with the audience in regards to healthy practices for COVID-19 and what we should continue to do? And then also it would be an opportunity for you to allow the audience to look a little bit more into what you do, and so you can share any Facebook or social media handles if you would like to do at this time, or any books that you have published. You can do that at this time.
Again, thank you very much for this invitation. I appreciate being on the panel and getting insight from different aspects of not only of COVID, but also in reference to social justice, as well as just any type of demonstration. My take home for everyone, please be mindful that social distancing works to keep wear your mask. It honestly makes a difference. So does washing hands and social distancing as well. That's my biggest take home. And I give lectures nationwide. If there is, you can easily follow me on, it's Dr. Chris ER. That's Dr. Chris ER. That's my Instagram as well as my Twitter handle as well. I'm always providing insight for everyone and willing to take any suggestions, comments as well. So again, honored to be a guest today. Thank you very much, and everyone, practice social distancing.
Perfect. Okay, Lindsay?
I too want to thank you for having me today and for hearing from these other panelists. It was great and informative. I'm at DC Inbox on Twitter. That is my handle there. And the last things I'd like to leave with people is the best way that I think we can all come together and make sure that we fight for justice is to seek information and share it with each other. So not getting into our own little silos, not going down our own rabbit holes, but making sure that we're all kind of in this kind of connected conversation together so that we can have those similar jumping off points and move together as a unified force versus being broken apart by our own little interests.
I agree. Okay, Alan?
Well, thank you again, Diane, and thank you to the fellow panelists. It was a very diverse range of thoughts today, and I must say that from the doctor It was some powerful insights into the COVID-19 that really inspired me, and hopefully his message can reach the peaceful protesters so they can take measures to protect themselves. It's a troubling time in America, and my prayers go out to everyone that we can have patience and perseverance to seek justice and also seek social reform and criminal justice reform. Criminal justice reform is something that we've needed to really change in this society. For too long, people have suffered unfair results in a criminal justice system that's broken, or a prison state. And if anybody wants to reach me, they can reach me at my website at www.allan, A-L-L-A-N-F, Friedman, F-R-I-E-D-M-A-N, law, L-A-W.com. And I thank you again, Diane. It's always a pleasure.
Great, absolutely. And so I also agree with Lindsay. We do not have to be individual into things that we have the right to speak out on. It's just, I think sometimes, we, some issues that may occur, I don't know, I guess sometimes certain ethical backgrounds may respond in different ways. And so this is to bring the audience some tips, tools, and resources in regards to three actual divisions, and one was in the criminal law system, the other one was in the justice, and one was in the COVID-19. Because in regards of what happens, we still have to be safe, we have to be vigilant, and we have to be cognizant as to what we're doing, what we're saying, and how we're doing it. Okay, and so that matters, and so we're supposed to be speaking out on anything. So if we just learn how to, bring all of the resources together, we all stick together, and we all come together, I think the incidents and also as to how we do things will turn out a little bit more effectively. So for all upcoming events that we have, you can, of course, go to our website, and that's going to be www.womenwhorockWithSuccess.com. And again, I thank all of my panelists for being on the show on today, and you have a great weekend.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.